You're opening your window. It's December. Oh, it's springtime there.
Yeah.
It's going to snow here. Today's Wednesday, and apparently there's going to be like not quite a blizzard, but I think they're saying like 8 or 9 inches of snow or something. It's going to be a.
What's that?
Snow? Well, you see, there is no snow under the Borealis, so the elves have to pipe it in from outside.
Oh, are you talking about the like white fluffy stuff?
Yes.
Got it.
Yes. Got it. See, that was a reference to the movie that we're talking about today.
Which is? Well, are we good to go now? Should we get started?
I mean, we're already kind of starting, yeah.
I think we are kind of already starting, but
yeah, we're just chatting about stuff.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm wondering if you're set up, if you're all set up and stuff over there.
Oh, I was born set up.
Mr. Clickety Clack, Clickety Clackety over there.
I'm saying hello to people. I'm saying hello to people in the chat too. But yeah, no, I'm set up.
To at once, Steve.
Depends on how many people are in the stream, I suppose.
Wow, that's now talk about existential. In the stream. Wow.
There is no stream.
Whoa. Now we're going full Matrix.
But anyway,
here we are.
So it's good to be back. It's December 2020. We're closing out the year. We're sipping on some cafe.
I wonder how many people thought you were going to say gin and juice.
Only those who really pop culture.
I pop all kinds of cultures.
So what we're doing actually right now is we're enjoying a little bit of Morning Brown. That's a reference to a Netflix. It's a Netflix joke that I've been watching, which is very funny. Auntie Dottie's something or other. It's like a really silly comedy show. Anyway, coffee made by our friend Tim called Wanderlust Coffee.
Yes, who is also the editor of this here podcastery.
Yes. Hello, Tim, both existentially and also editorially. Hello.
There are some who call him Tim.
Totally.
But yeah, we're working our way through a ancient faith radio blend. It's pretty exciting.
So the cool thing about Wanderlust is this new project that Tim started, and it's a way to support some nonprofits out there. And they have an ancient faith radio blend, which is very like milk chocolatey. It's very kind of like mellow and soothing, and I really enjoy it. I'm normally like a brighter, like lighter roast kind of coffee person, but I like it. It's very tasty. And it's a way to support ancient faith radio. And we're actually kind of thinking about maybe doing a pop culture blend at some point. So stay tuned for that.
I think it should just be called the Pop Culture Coffee Hour Coffee.
Brought to you by the American Men of America.
The National League of American Men of America.
Yes, that's right. Tim, can we squeeze all that on the label? Let's see if we can do this.
Wait, do we have any other sponsors? I feel like we had some other sponsors.
Apparently they've dropped us.
Oh man.
That's too bad. Yeah, it's really a shame.
Alas.
Anyway, it's good coffee. Check it out. Wanderlust Coffee, the Ancient Faith Radio blend. And they've got some other blends as well, but check it out. It's good stuff. It's Christmas next week. We're almost at the end of 2020.
Next week. Or this week, if you're listening to the audio.
That's right. This is going to, normally this would be our last, our kind of like last podcast of the year before we're going to take a break for Christmas and a little January. But we've got something in the works for next week.
We sure do. For all you little good girls and good boys, a little extra dose of pop culture cheer coming your way. But it's a surprise. Right. We can't tell you it's a surprise.
Yeah. Although, if you've been longtime fans, you know what we tend to do in December. So
don't
hint, nudge, nudge.
Stop porging at these people right now. You're porging them.
I hear a recorder.
Yeah. Also, I'm wondering, is there a way to make sure that only the good boys and girls can get that podcast?
I don't know.
Can we get like notes to people's confessions?
You do not have access to the podcast. No.
Yeah. You must have like a letter from your pastor like approving you to listen to this one.
Yes, you must be in good standing.
Yes. That sounds about right.
Yeah. All the good little ortho bros and girls out there.
Ortho bros. Yeah. Anyway,
that's basically it.
You can just send your confession notes directly to me, my email. That'll be fine.
You are a marriage and family therapist. It'll be under the seal of confidentiality.
Well, only if I sign an informed consent. That's only for my clients. If you want me to keep it secret, you can pay me to do that.
Otherwise,
this is getting very close to something else that has happened in the history of the church. I mean, not the Orthodox Church, but other parts of Christianity.
Christianity writ large.
Just why don't you pay me for this, and we'll pretend it never happened.
And an hour into our podcast,
God to look the other way. God to look the other way.
Yeah, there's going to be a reformation halfway through this episode. That's what's going to happen.
Yes, indeed.
This is going to split into 2 podcasts.
Yeah. And then about 10,000.
Yeah, and they yes, by January.
That's just going to happen real quick too.
Yeah.
It's going to be real quick.
Yeah. By the time 2021 rolls around, there's pop culture coffee hour, true pop culture coffee hour, pop culture coffee doesn't matter hour.
First free pop culture coffee hour.
Yeah. Pop culture, we question the existence of time.
Mm-hmm.
Why does it have to be pop culture hour?
Seventh day pop culture coffeeists.
And then pop Mormonism. I don't know.
Yeah. For some reason, I just like the visual that came to mind with pop Mormonism is for sure like a High School Musical-esque kind of situation. Not like quite full like Book of Mormon Broadway show, but like approaching it for sure.
Like Community's Glee parody, that kind of thing.
Oh man, that is one of the best episodes. That's so funny.
Which we will be covering at some point in a future episode after we take our hiatus with our little Christmas break. But truly. I think that's it. I think that's all the follow-up for today. Anything else to report?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, then let's get into the meat, the fast friendly meat of today's podcast. What are we covering today, Christian?
You mean the tofurkey? Is that what you're talking about? Let's get into the tofurkey and potatoes.
It's impossible. It's impossible.
The impossible meat?
Yes, which is good.
The beyond meat? The beyond meat and potatoes.
And beyond.
Yes. Today we're talking about the Netflix original movie. I think they're Netflix originals.
Yes.
Starring Kurt Russell as Santa Claus, known as the Christmas Chronicles, both 1 and part 2.
The legend continues.
Yeah. Indeed.
So these are newish movies. I think the first one came out like in 2018, and the second one came out a couple of weeks ago. So because we are still very much, I think, in the realm of newness, if you don't want to be spoiled, you should probably pause this and go watch the videos. If you want to get spoiled, though, of course, like, hang out with us. But in fine pop culture coffee hour tradition, we are going to unleash the porgs.
Release the porgs. They're everywhere.
They're insistent little guys.
So many porgs everywhere today. Oh, the porgs. Here they come.
You've been warned.
You've been warned.
You've been porked. Okay, so now this is a spoiler zone. You're in a spoiler zone now. We're getting into it.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you tell us what it's about, Steve? Ben?
I would be happy to. So in short, because these are 2 movies that we're talking about today, these are 2 Christmas movies that are starring Kurt Russell as Santa. We'll talk about the portrayal of Santa. I think there's a lot to enjoy there. In the first one, so Santa is making his deliveries, and there's 2 kids, Teddy and Kate, who hop into his sleigh. They cause Santa to crash, and there's this like massive catastrophe. Santa loses his hat, which he says is kind of the source of his magic, so he's not able to continue his journey. And Kate and Teddy have to help Santa like rescue Christmas, basically. But it turns out that Santa had magic within him all along, and it was just like a thing that he contrived to really help Teddy and Kate. Teddy in particular, who was dealing with issues of like losing his dad. And so Teddy kind of comes to terms with the loss of his dad. He actually like it heals his relationship with his family. Very heartwarming. The second one happens 2 years later. This time, Kate is the one who has the issues. Her mom is now dating this guy, Bob. The relationship is going well. The whole family has gone to Cancun. Kate is worried that Bob is going to propose to her mom. She thinks that this is going to diminish the memory of her dad. So she wants to kind of like run away and have nothing to do with it. An estranged former elf called Belschnickel, which I can't help but hear that word and think of Dwight Schrute from The Office, by the way, when I hear Belschnickel. Belschnickel uses Kate to infiltrate the North Pole because he's this like estranged elf and he wants to take down Santa Claus. But again, Santa apparently has everything under control because he uses this whole adventure, which includes time travel, where Kate actually like talks to her dad in his teenage years and has this cathartic moment with him, which then causes her to accept the evolution of her family and, you know, the relationship with Bob and so forth. And all's well at the end as well. So Santa uses this as an opportunity to like heal Kate in the second one. But that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, that was the one part I think that was orchestrated, right? Like, or somehow, like he like somehow made that happen. But
because Santa says like she says, well, how does he say it? He's like, oh, that was totally a coincidence, right? Or something like that. Like he very much feels in control of even this one.
Really? I didn't feel that way. Anyway, but
we can talk about it
at some point. Yeah. Yeah. So these movies are incredibly cheesy. There's no doubt. In fact, one review I even read called it cheese on top of cheese covered in fondue. And I think it's a pretty appropriate description of it, but maybe a little harsh, but definitely true. But for the record, like, you know, I really loved it. And there are some very, very funny reviews out there about these movies. So if you're up for it, I mean, they're definitely not favorable ones. Like they're pretty mean to the movie, but they're funny. But I enjoyed these movies, and plus I think watching them with my kids, like that probably made it a lot more stomachable. You know, but of course, like I'm definitely a sucker for cheesy movies, and you know, I'm known to get, you know, very teary-eyed watching them. Like there's been more than one occasion where my wife and I have sat down to watch like one of those just like cheesy holiday movies, and like I'm super not into it, but she like, you know, wants to watch it. Like we even the other, like a couple months ago, we watched Julia and Julia. You know the one I'm talking about? The one that kind of like goes. So it's this movie with Amy Adams and Meryl Streep playing. She plays Julia Child. Meryl Streep does, and it goes back and forth between kind of like modern day stuff, like this woman cooking through all of Meryl Streep's recipes and all this kind of stuff. And my wife wanted to watch it, and I was like, oh, I can't believe we're going to watch this movie. And she was asleep probably within 10 minutes of starting the movie. And I sat there and watched the entire thing, and I was just like really enjoying it. So that happens a lot, but these movies fall into a category that probably is way beyond the cheesiness of anything you've seen. So buyer be warned.
Cheesy, yes, but very fun.
Yes, so fun.
I thought these were super delightful. It was weird at times, like what they did with the actual story of like Saint Nicholas, right? Because it turns out that Santa Claus is actually Saint Nicholas. Like in the second movie, they actually go back in time to Asia Minor, and you see Saint Nicholas like as a bishop, right, walking around doing his thing, putting oranges in sacks and all that. So it's weird and interesting and cool what they do with like actual church history, and then the elves and all the orders, like weird mythology. But they're delightful.
It's a pretty sharp left turn.
Yes. Yeah. But they're delightful. They're fun. I think there's a lot of like really interesting, just emotional depth to them. Like they're cheesy in the sense of like being kind of schmaltzy and comforting, right? But I don't know. Sometimes like at the end of a really tough year, like there's nothing wrong with watching a movie that has a wonderful like happy ending and actually says something kind of interesting. And because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that we can dig into today. So it's definitely not like thin or boring or superficial, like as cheesy as it is. Like they're worth taking a look.
Definitely. So why don't we go ahead and start kind of where you've already put us, right? Because there are some pretty common themes through both of the movies, but the basic premise, right, is here comes Santa Claus.
Yes, here comes Santa Claus.
Yeah, jolly old Saint Nick. And I want to talk about definitely like Kurt Russell's portrayal and depiction of him.
Yeah.
Which, I've heard some people actually criticize, but like,
really,
yeah. And I think this is actually one of the best Santa Clauses that is there, right? Because there's no doubt that he takes some of the most winsome aspects of kind of like the secular Santa Claus that we know and love, right? And combines them with the most badass traits of simply being Kurt Russell. Right? The same, like, Escape from LA dude is playing Santa, which is just incredible. It's just so fun. Because he isn't just like, some like chubby dude who's peddling gifts, but like he actually, I thought really seemed to like embody some of the things about the actual Saint Nicholas that we love in our church, like our church hagiography and stuff like this.
Yeah.
What did you think?
I super enjoyed it. And I also love, so there's two things that I liked about it. One, like you said, there's a strength to this portrayal of Santa Claus, which I very much enjoy. Like he's got kind of I like that you brought up, Escape from LA, because Kurt Russell, right? Like he kind of cut his teeth as an action star, like in the 80s and the 90s, right? There definitely is this like outdoorsy, kind of just like tough old guy, this tough as nails guy who, lives in a village out in the middle of nowhere, right? Who's clearly capable of like great feats of heroism. He's got like almost a retired action movie, kind of like action hero kind of vibe to him, which is kind of
totally
cool. And he kind of has an interesting dialogue with like the commercialized aspect of Santa Claus. Like he resents the fact that he's always portrayed as having this big gut, because he's like, I'm in gym like once a week, like every day, like during the week, right? Like that's offensive. He's a guy who like believes in something, who stands up for stuff, who like works hard, who clearly has like, he's like a tinkerer, right? He's kind of like this genius who makes toys. He's the leader of this community. Like he just has like an interesting depth, which the Coca-Cola Santa lacks. And he kind of pokes holes in that, which is really interesting. And this was, I think, a positive connection with like the church history, right? Because like you said, you can see this strong depiction of Santa Claus with like integrity and sort of like a moral compass, which connects with who Saint Nicholas actually was, right?
Yeah. There's more to it than like, he's actually way more concerned about the spirit of Christmas than he is about like delivering the gifts, right? Yeah. Like he wants to deliver the gifts because that's just part of his generosity, right? Like he's a generous guy. Like that's what he does, is he gives things.
He delights in it.
He does, but it's not about that for him. It really is far more like what things run on is the spirit of Christmas for him, which we'll talk about later, right? So his fervor, I think is like a really powerful thing. And I think, this connects with, again, the St. Nicholas of history, where, one of the most beloved stories, of course, of like St. Nicholas that faithful Orthodox all around the world know is the time he allegedly accosted the heretic Arius for speaking, poorly about like the divinity of Jesus, or, denying it altogether, which is like kind of awesome. Like, don't talk that way about my Lord. So like, I think that there is a kind of tepid Christmas spirity thing that in this, but what I do think it connects to is the fervor with which he's attached to these things, which I love that like Mrs. Claus even kind of points out at some point, right? Like this kind of like toughness in his character, this kind of, I don't know, like he almost like loves the danger, right? She says that, like, I'm even starting to think that sometimes you like them. I'm starting to think you like these dangerous adventures. And it's a beautiful moment actually. Because he's not like, at first he's like, oh, and then he goes like, well, yeah.
Yeah, he won't lie to his wife, right? He does kind of like try to hem and haw for a little bit, but he's like, yeah, I do.
Yeah. Like, and that honestly is like, I think one of the, I loved the Mrs. Claus, Santa Claus thing, like, because, Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn are partners in real life, which is, and they've been so for close to 40 years. So what's cool is to like have them kind of in this space where they're, now they are this married couple who've been together for almost like a couple millennia, which is basically like what 40 years in Hollywood is the equivalent of. So
right.
But like what was so refreshing to me too watching this, and this is just kind of a side thought, like as someone who sees a lot of married couples, what's sad is that it seems like the longer people are married, they often kind of grate on each other more. But I felt like Santa and Mrs. Claus actually seemed to really appreciate each other more.
Yeah.
There was no like they weren't critical of, like, she wasn't critical of him, and you can see how much he just loves like her sweetness, and her own hospitality. And he's like, well, it'd be really mean to send them home without dinner. And she's like, and like you can see that I'm getting emotional like thinking about it, but it's like it's this gift that he gives her, of like, I know who you are, and I know your heart, and I know who you want to be, and like it delights him to do that, which I just thought was really, really beautiful, that they call the best out of each other and just prize one another. It's cool. Anyway.
No, it was sweet, right? Like, and there's moments, I think, which I think actually connect to the character of Santa Claus, right? The way that he's portrayed, because he's a guy who clearly has like a strong inner compass and just kind of a good heart, right? Like, one of the things that he values, right, to your point earlier, it's more than just the gifts. Like, he values the true believers who are out there, right? And there's like these family genealogies, like this history of true believers, people who really understand the spirit of Christmas and embody it in their lives. And it's something he embodies in his day-to-day life. Like his entire life is dedicated to generosity. And then like on the home front, right, there is generosity towards his wife, which manifests in like the sweet moments where, they fall asleep on the couch and their feet are kind of like on top of each other, right? They're just watching a movie and they fall asleep. And which is, it's a really funny, interesting domestic twist for this cosmic being that is, racing through wormholes and whatever it is. And yet at the very end of movie 2, as he's going to drop the kids off at Cancun, she just sort of looks at him and says, hurry home. Right. Like, she misses him when he's gone. Right. And like, there's a human depth there. Because so much of this portrayal of Santa Claus is like relational, right? I mean, it's really about people who exercise generosity and love and embody this like true meaning of Christmas. And that's really what he's about. And he's willing to fight for it, and he's willing to fight for them, which is, I think is beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, because it's not the like, ho, 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 come sit on my lap and be, blah, 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 right? It's like, it's the ferocity, like the ferocity of his spirit, I think, that you see. And in reality, like, this is what the church knows about him, that he's not a safe saint. Like, there's sort of a degree of like, I hesitate to use the word body, but like there's a reason he appeals to like the body types, right? Yeah. Like isn't just the patron saint of children, right? He's the patron saint of brewers, which is awesome. Sailors who definitely are not like the most savory company. And he's also the patron saint of like criminals and murderers. So it's like, you gotta wonder about this kind of stuff, right? That like the church assigns him to some of the like most unsavory people in society. In the idea that he can be the pastor to those people, right? Yeah. He's not somehow like, scandalized by them.
Well, and as I think about this, right, this is just kind of like a new angle that kind of came to mind. Christ has that whole thing, you've got to be hot or cold. If you're lukewarm, I'm going to spit you out. Like there's something hot or cold about those kinds of people, right? Like the sailors, the sort of like, the guys like who are going headlong into storms, and even like the murderers and the whatever, right? There's something that burns hot or cold about these people. And St. Nicholas is this hot or cold. There's nothing lukewarm about him.
No, he's all in. From the like, even just like the narrative, like when his parents die, right, and he inherits his wealth, and he hears Jesus say like, sell everything you have and give it to the poor. He's like, all right,
like,
I'm all in.
Yeah, which is why I think, and we can talk about the second movie, right? But like clearly in the first movie, the whole thing is contrived as a way to save Teddy. Right. Mm-hmm. He literally like he bends space and time in order to like save this kid. He lies. It's an innocent lie, but it's like he lies and says like, oh, the magic is in the hat. I can't do this by myself. He, the whole arc of episode 1 is like like his Christmas is on the line for the sake of like saving Teddy. This is like such an example of, he's willing to sacrifice he's willing to leave the 99 to go out there, right, and look for the one, right? And like that is an example of love that burns hot and burns brightly. And there's again, like it all fits. Like that's such a beautiful portrayal of this pastor. Saint Nicholas is known as like the model pastor. We just celebrated him not too long ago. Not because he left us any writings, not because he's known as a particularly like good faster or, like didn't have any divine visions that we know of or anything. Like he just like, he loved people.
Yeah,
he loved people with everything. He took his sheep onto his shoulders. He's a model bishop to this day in the church.
Yeah.
And you see that in this like Kurt Russell portrayal of Santa Claus.
Yeah. I mean, even to the point where like the Troparion for every bishop in the church is modeled after him to him.
Yeah.
And he's even in that he's called like the rule of faith. Like you want to see what it looks like? That's what it looks like. Like this is what it looks like to truly embody the Christian gospel. And again, like you said, he wasn't, to at least to our knowledge, some sort of like, extraordinarily like impressive aesthetic. And I mean, not that he didn't, keep the fasts and all of this kind of stuff, but like, it's just not what he's known for. What he's known for is that relational dynamic, like you're saying, it's cool.
Yeah. Which totally comes across. And that's why I think, right? Like, I don't know, my sense is because he did that in the first movie, just based on some of those comments about like, none of this was coincidental. Like, I kind of think he did that in the second movie too. I think a lot of this was him being more powerful and more in control of the situation than we realize. Yeah. And actually allowing Belschnickel and whatever to have their little like tiffs and kind of have their moments of rage and so forth, because he had it all. He had it all.
Well, I wonder if really because I do feel like Kate and Jack are kind of like they feel accidental to me, because like he seems surprised to see them when he's chasing the cat and like he's alone and all of that kind of stuff, right? He's like, oh, what's going on? All of that kind of stuff. But I wonder if like in that moment, even maybe he knows what's going on. Like, oh, Belschnickel's kind of, doing something here. And maybe the whole thing is orchestrated actually to save Belschnickel and not Kate. And Kate becomes a member, like a part of the plan to redeem the sheep who has gone astray. Because I mean, they're really like one of the most, for sure. Like I got pretty emotional in the end when he became an elf again, right?
Yeah.
And like all of the elves are like, wah! And they're
you're back,
like literally throwing him around.
Yeah.
It's not, they're not just like hoisting him up, they're throwing him. And
it's beach ball style, like beach ball at a concert.
Which was very funny. But like I was thinking about, like there's more rejoicing in heaven over the repentance of one sinner. Like that was like what came to mind perfectly in that image of like, oh, this is what that means, and this is what that looks like, and this is him going after the one, leaving the 99, right? Because like he's not worried about the like. I mean, yeah, the elves go nuts in that one moment, but he's not like, I need to save all of these elves. He's like, I need to go, get the star, and like part of that maybe is, for the sake of Belschnickel.
Yeah, because he trusts Mrs. Claus to handle it, right? He trusts Jacob, right, to handle it. It's interesting because that's part of the risk. Like the 99 are in good hands. He doesn't need to worry about them right now. He needs to worry about Belschnickel in that moment.
Yeah. And I feel like this, like it's such an indictment on us in some ways too, to see kind of how he does that, right? Because he goes all in on everything that he does. Yeah. He doesn't really like, and Saint Nicholas IRL is the same way. He goes whole hog on everything. He goes all in on Jesus. And with that, it seems like if you're gonna do that, you're gonna put a lot on the line. There's gonna be high risk and danger, and and I don't think it's the same as like needless self-endangerment, right? Like skydiving and trusting like without a parachute, like, well, I believe fully that God will catch me before I hit the ground. Like that's not what I'm talking about, right? But what I'm talking about is like going into like the dangerous places, into I mean, like, think about the places where Santa ends up in this, right? He goes to prison and he goes to an airport. Like, these are not happy places, right? Like, there's like, these are places where people's souls are sucked out of them in a great many ways.
Yeah.
But I wonder, you know, like, if maybe we need to kind of accept that, like, when Jesus calls us, right? I mean, whoa, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in his book, The Cost of Discipleship, he makes it very clear, like right from the very beginning, he says, when Christ calls a man, he bids him to come and die. Like, that is the call of the cost of discipleship. And I wonder, is that really the call that we hear ourselves, right? Come and die. Or do we hear kind of like a, you know, the idea that like church and youth ministry and all this kind of stuff is about being safe and like being good?
Yeah.
Right. Does that make sense?
It does, which I think connects to this idea of like risk. And I think connects to this idea of adventure, right? Part of me was like tempted to say fun, but I'm not going to say fun. I'm going to say more like adventure, right? Because if the call to be a Christian is to like pick up your cross and be ready to die, right? Like that's very high stakes. Number one, it means it's very risky. Number two, and I think as a consequence of that, like there's a deeper emotional investment, right? Like this is where that sense of adventure comes in, and this is what Santa is doing in these movies. This is what he's calling these kids to do in the movies as well, right? It's to sort of put themselves on the line for the sake of something bigger than themselves, something worth putting themselves on the line for, right? And there's a lot of joy that comes with it. There's a lot of like adventure that comes along with it, right? There's meaning that comes along with it. And like so often when we think about, I think it's a really astute point to tie this with ministry, right? We kind of think about like ministry has to be fun for the sake of like kids in particular. Like it's got to be something that they're gonna connect with. It's got to be like candy, right? Something that's going to be sweet, something that they're going to enjoy. But it's not this like deeper fun, right? This like there's a difference between like maybe like a way to make this concrete, like Santa having Teddy and then Jacob, right, in the second movie, fly the sled, right? Which is this kind of like, I'm giving you responsibility. I'm literally, in a sense, putting my life in your hands because I trust you, because I love you, and I'm putting you in a position to grow. There's stakes in this moment, and I trust you to sort of rise to these stakes, as opposed to you sit in the back seat and I'm going to do the driving, right? Which is the way that we sometimes kind of like frame ministry. Like you're kind of like, you're watching this, you're a participant, you're having fun, right? We're having a pizza party, whatever it is, as opposed to the real fun is going to come from this sense of adventure because something is on the line, because something matters, because you're called into this risky thing, as opposed to you're just called to watch this diversion.
Yeah. You know, like I'm thinking now too. So like I used to be really involved with Yes, which is a part of, you know, a ministry of Focus North America, which is incredible. Of course, COVID stuff has really, I think, probably shut things down in a major way. And what Yes would do is it would go, you know, into inner cities and expose young people to like the poverty of their, like where they live, and show them parts of like their cities that they likely had never seen before, you know, like people like sleeping in tents on the streets or just directly on like the sidewalks and stuff like this.
Yeah.
Like the real cost of people experiencing homelessness. Right. And like I would, one of the trips that I did every year was I would go to Skid Row in LA with a bunch of kids. And we would stay in one of the missions down in there, right? You like walk outside and people are like outside of this mission is where we would sleep, and there'd be people on the streets right at the door. Just like tons of people, and it's crazy because like just very, very, very affluent parts of the city are blocks away, you know, like in like a matter of streets, you cross from one place where people are sleeping on the streets to like a very just like wealthy area. And it's crazy. It feels like you're going from like a third world country into, you know, whatever the opposite of that is.
And Skid Row is massive, right? Skid Row is like multiple city blocks. It's like,
oh yeah,
it's a neighborhood, right?
it's yeah, exactly. And it's just like these people have been pushed to the fringes, like, you know, in a very real way. So but those trips were incredibly transformative. And there's no doubt that Skid Row is like a less safe, if we want to use that word, area, right? Like it's just not as feelingly safe anyway.
Sure.
And like those trips, I think, were incredibly uncomfortable for a lot of folks, but also very important and transformative. Because like you begin to open your eyes to the inequality that is just like in our world, you know, that it's devastating and heartbreaking.
And right around the block.
Right around the block. And like, that is where you begin to see like, oh, Jesus became one of these people, right? When he says like the Son of Man has no place to lay his head, like that's what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the hungry, the thirsty, the poor, the naked, the imprisoned, all of this stuff. Like that is who he is and who he became. Not out of an act of like, charity, but out of an act of like real solidarity, right? Like wanting to come be in it with us. And I think like that there's a risk that leads to the cross there for him, Yeah. And maybe that's like what our thing is too. Like we it's inherently dangerous to follow him. When Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. And I wonder like where are we being called then, in this kind of like dangerous way of following Jesus, like St. Nicholas did,
Yeah.
He gives it all away. Like he just goes like, well, I'm going to become poor for the sake of the poor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
don't know if that makes any sense.
It does. Like where are we being called, and where are we as like the grownups in the room, right? Calling others, especially like younger people who are really like still developing their sense of what the church is and what the Christian life is. Like, where are we calling them into as well? It's a challenge, right? And like, and I think it's a powerful, like I've never been, right? I've never been. I've heard, we've talked about this before. And I've talked about it with Katrina before, right? Who like, leads the trips and is the head of Yes, our friend Katrina. But like, there's risk there, right? There's sort of like, there's this pushing of boundaries, like pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone. And there's this real like invitation to do something that matters. And maybe that's not what we're all called to do, right? But like, that's the kind of thing that we're all called to do as Christians, right? Because like the way we pick up the cross obviously is going to depend upon the particular talents that God has given us, right? Maybe we're not called to like go across the country to Skid Row. Maybe we're called to like help people who are like in nursing homes in our neighborhood, right? Or whatever it is. But like that kind of like leaving the 99 for the one, like going for the person who is lonely, who is downtrodden, who is whatever. Yeah.
What there is no doubt about is that we are all called into experiences of death. Like that, like there's no doubt about that. We are like, each one of us for sure is called into like the hell of this world.
Yeah.
So, like there's no doubt about that. You can't, we're not supposed to be protected from it. We're supposed to go in it and overthrow it as Jesus does. We're following him into it. Like he's already there. I mean, this is what this icon is all about, right? Like you go to these places, he's there. Like this is not taking place outside of anywhere but Hades.
Yeah.
Like the land of the dead. Like that's where we're to follow him. We're to follow him to go raise the dead, to be his hands and his feet. Like that's dangerous work. That's dangerous work. And like I was thinking about this, that like this is why the churches practice to us, right, of like prayer, fasting, and almsgiving are this like unified triad, right? Like because I was even thinking about like fasting is this kind of, I think we can kind of put it on ourselves, right, to be like practicing discipline, and I'm avoiding meat and dairy, and I'm like as if there's just certain foods that like we're supposed to simply stay away from. Mm-hmm. But like in Isaiah 58, like God makes it very clear that fasting is supposed to be connected with giving. And so my thought was like, well, fasting, if maybe the part of it is to like help us begin to like feel like what hunger really is, so that we get used to kind of like living without something, right?
Mhm.
And to realize like there are hungry people in our midst, and so like you don't eat, and then so that somebody else can, right? Like you absorb their hunger, you take their hunger, you live it for them, which is a very Jesus-y thing.
Mhm.
You know, like I will take your death and give you my life. I will take your hunger and give you my satisfaction. I will take your hunger and give you my food. You know, I will be hungry today. You don't be hungry today. Like that to me seems to connect with this idea of like just being being a disposition toward the world. You know, like my thought was like, what if on Wednesdays and Fridays, like that was part of our practice, was like not just avoiding meat and dairy and thinking more about food. You know, can I get a soy burger? Does this have cheese in it? Does that have da da da? But being like, I'm actually just going to buy whatever food I want, and instead of eating it, I'm going to give it to somebody, and I'm just going to be hungry for
Mhm.
lunch today. You know, I'll eat dinner, whatever. I don't know. It was just a thought. Does that make any? I don't know if that's. I don't know.
It
Not
does.
making any
No,
sense.
well, it does. It's, I think it's helpful to like, it reframes the way that we sometimes think about even like the basic rhythms of the Christian life. Like
Yeah.
Father Evan Armitage has a book that came out like a month or two ago, which, you know, like the metaphor that is sometimes used, right? Prayer, fasting, almsgiving. It's kind of like the three legs of this stool, right? That are kind of
Mm-hmm.
like at the core of the Christian life. So he's got a really, really good little primer on some of this. And I think the idea is like all three of those legs need to be at play, because they avoid, like when only one of them or two of them become kind of the center of our lives, it throws the balance off, right? Like there's nothing like fasting, for instance, right? Like here's like a silly example of this, like looking at it in a legalistic sense, right? The rules of the church, like I could sit down and have like a crab or a lobster dinner, right? As opposed to like a 99-cent cheeseburger from McDonald's, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can spend like $50 on and that's Lenten, as opposed to like the 99-cent cheese quarter pounder from McDonald's or whatever it is, right? And on some sense, sure, that's Lenten. But in a deeper sense, is it really? Right? Like if that's the one leg that we are standing on, or the, you know, the prayer leg and the fasting leg, or the, like that's very much about me, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
that the almsgiving leg is this thing that avoids us from sort of like making this just about me and this obsessive, like, you know, reading the ingredients, right? And having like this bigger picture sense of what this means. Because what you're suggesting is like a really interesting and like creative approach to this. Okay, like what happens if if I miss lunch today and I buy somebody else a hamburger, right? Like why not? Or, you
Mm-hmm.
know, instead of getting seconds, right? Instead of getting seconds, I give my seconds to somebody else, whatever it might be. Um, you know,
Yeah.
there's a tension there, right? And I think that the almsgiving piece of it in particular like ensures us that like the Christian life is this thing that's grounded in reality. It's not just kind of this solo spiritual sort of quest or spiritual sort of
Mm-hmm.
discipline, which I think is something that we see in the way that like Santa Claus is portrayed here, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not just
Yeah.
about him, and he's calling people out of themselves, right, to serve other people and establish like in their family and their community, right, saving the world even. It's not just this like, I don't know, this what's the word, a like obscure mystical and kind of a superficial sense of the word, like thing that I am doing as opposed to a thing that we are doing, right? Or a
Mm.
thing that I am doing with you, maybe even to make it more, to be more accurate about that.
Right. Yeah, like a leading of the person into like giving one's life for the world, as our Lord does
Yeah.
all the time. Like he's still giving us his life, right? In the Eucharist. Um, and this is like the prayer, right, of Saint Ignatius, or like the, you know, not the prayer, but I guess the prayer. Yeah, we'll call it the prayer, where he says he wants to be ground to wheat by the teeth of the beast, so that he might be made into the pure bread of Christ. Like that to me is like, what, you know, like what if we had that? Like I want to be ground to wheat. I want to be so broken down, so torn apart, so shredded, so unrecognizable, that I can be formed into something else, like formed into the thing that Jesus would have me be, which is a really like a body and blood offering for the world, like
Yeah.
him, right?
Yeah.
Like it's, if the end game is deification, like that doesn't look like what we think it looks like, probably.
Yeah.
You know, like if becoming like Jesus is the game, then like it's then the way is the cross,
Yeah.
and that means spilling blood for other people.
For others, right?
Yeah.
So maybe like a way to like tie this back to the movies is when you think about like what sin looks like in this universe, or what like corruption looks like in this universe, right?
Yeah.
Like Teddy at the very beginning, he's kind of like standoffish from his family. He's sort of doing his own thing. He's being kind of his authentic sort of teenage self, stealing cars or whatever, right? It's this anti-family, anti-community thing. Kate is like, she wants to run away, right? That's kind of like her sin that happens at the very beginning of the second movie, right? Or in a deeper sense, the fall of Belschnickel, right? Who breaks this elvish code, right? It's like the five sins, right? That the elves do,
Right.
whatever. It's like envy, lying,
ego.
I forget what they are.
Like egoism, selfishness.
Yeah, egoism, selfishness. What was V? Vainglory? I don't remember. But like all of those are these like anti-other people sins, right? Like there's something like the existentially, right, at the core of these movies, like to fall, right, to be corrupted is this thing that like is a breach of something with other people. Like Teddy's breach with his family, Kate's breach with his family, Belschnickel's breach with Santa Claus, which I think kind of connects what we're saying here, right? Like the life in Christ is this thing that is like grounded in the community of the church, which is the body of Christ. And we can be tempted sometimes to make these things like hyper individualistic, right? Which is just kind of a different way of doing American consumerism. It's like my prayer, my fasting, and that's it. But I think this movie, which has this like community understanding of like virtue and vice, like kind of helps push against that.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. Like that is, it's always in that relational place that we're called. I hear something whistling.
Oh, that's my my dryer. My clothes are done.
Oh, what a musical dryer you have.
Yes.
Does it just make you automatically in a good mood? Or you're like, oh, yeah, my clothes are done. Yeah.
I skip to get my undershirts. Yes.
Hurrah! That's funny. That is that is the happiest dryer I've ever heard. It's like, I just love serving you. That's what it's saying to you. I just love that I get to do this for you.
The house elf. Yeah.
You're my special guy. That's what it says.
You.
Yeah. Like, I think that, you know, what you're calling to is that, or speaking to here, is that there has to be like that personal kind of call, right? That like, that is given to us, first of all, by Christ, right? Like, but you see, especially like, I'm thinking right now when we watch The Chosen, right? There's that moment, I think it's at the end of the first episode, when Jesus calls Mary by her name, even though she's been going by a totally different name up till then. Is she going by like Judith or something like that? I can't remember.
Yes, something like that.
Yeah. Some sort of name for a woman of the night. But he calls her by name.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most like just beautiful moments. Like I remember just like sobbing. Like, I mean, that show, tear jerkers galore.
Oh yeah.
But there's something to that calling by name, right? Like, even when we're told in Revelation that like, you know, each of us will be given a white stone with a name that only like we know and the Lord knows.
Yeah.
Which is basically like, right, that's it, the name and the thing kind of being one. Which I don't know if you've kept reading like The Name of the Wind or The Wise Man's Fear or those other books by Patrick Rothfuss.
I'm done with both of them.
Yeah, they're okay.
They're long, but they're okay.
People really love them, and I'm like, this book is okay.
Yeah,
not my jam. Just not. I don't know what it was. But I love the mythology though, like of his world. His world is amazing. Yeah. But like the actual like writing of it, I'm like, meh, okay. Like he's an okay writer. Maybe I'm probably scandalizing so many human beings right now. I'm sorry, everybody, but I just didn't think they were that interesting.
I mean, I've got them actually right here, right? Like, I'll just say, like, it's a big commitment, right? And this is not like large text. It's a lot.
Yeah, the second book is 1,000 pages.
Yeah, they are fun. I don't know that I'm going to reread them, but they were fun.
And I'll read the last one when it comes out, if it ever comes out.
Yeah.
But there's something too, like in that, right? The mythology of it, like having the name for a thing, right, means that you somehow know the thing, right? Like you know you understand everything about it. And I think that that's kind of what this is attesting to, is that power of like the name and the relationality. And like when Satan shows up, Santa,
Not even close.
oh, the opposite. Wow.
They both dress in red.
Well, this has been a really great episode of Pop Culture Coffee Hour. We're going to go. We told you an hour in there was going to be a split. This is it. This is the old Satan controversy. Oh gosh, I'm sorry.
Podcast is over. Click.
Yeah, done. Well, I quit at everything forever. When Santa shows up and he calls people by name, right? Like in the first one, especially, he goes into that and he's like, "Oh, you," and he's like speaks their language and he like all of this kind of stuff. There's something really powerful for these people because they're always like, "How do you know my name?" Right? That there's a attachment of the person to the name, to being called into something greater. And there is something so powerful in truly being known. Which is just it's so beautiful throughout this movie, right? And as these people are known, they're able to take on these new identities and remember who they are, right?
Yeah, because that calling you by name, right, is the invitation into the adventure, right? Like there's that scene in the restaurant in the first movie, the pub, whatever it is, right? Nick's pub. I think when the sleigh crashes and Saint Nick sees Nick's pub across the way, he's like, "Oh, that's a good place to start." And he needs to get some money to like hire an Uber, right? It's this whole like back and forth, like, I don't have an account. This very charming back and forth with the hostess in the restaurant, and he knows her name, right? He knows like what she wants for Christmas. She knows about the letter that she wrote her mom, and like it is this intimacy, this being known, which becomes kind of the first step into this adventure. Like, can you help me now? Right? I know you. I see you. Can you help me now? He goes to that guy, right? And he wants to borrow the guy's Porsche. And to give him his Porsche, he's like, "Haven't you always wanted this Mickey Mantle rookie card since you were a little kid?" Right? There's like this appeal.
He knows what his heart really wants.
Yes. And that becomes this moment of connection. Like, I know you. I see you. I'm here to give you what you want, right? And come follow me. Right. Which is beautiful. And it's interesting because like so many of the people who are in that restaurant, certainly everybody says no. They just think that he's like this crazy old coot, even though, he's coming to them and speaking like their language, right? He's like, he clearly knows every language on the face of the planet. And yet still, despite these proofs, despite the fact that this invitation into intimacy, people keep saying no to the call. Which is what makes, I think, Teddy and Kate like so special on some level, right? Like he walks away from them. He walks away from the crash, and they, instead of going home, they choose to follow him, and they choose to actually try to make this right. They choose to actually try to sacrifice themselves to make sure that Christmas spirit actually happens.
Right. Yeah.
They rise to this adventure, whereas not everybody does.
Right. Yeah. And I think you see that happen kind of in a different way with Jack in the second one. Right, where basically also one review that I read said Jack is an 11-year-old character whose entire personality could be summed up as, quote, "has allergies."
That's not wrong.
I was like, that's so sad and so mean and so also not entirely inaccurate. Yeah, like
it's not wrong.
Oh man.
I don't think they did this right, but like, poor Jack is the sort of kid that like in the midst of an action sequence would pull out his inhaler, right? Like that's that's
totally
the character.
It was just like one step short of that, and it was that step. But everything else, when he's just like, "Oh, blah, 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 blah. I wish that we could be more, whatever in proximity and safer." Like, "Oh, I'll have the chocolate milk without the lactose." Like,
yes.
So just chocolate. Like, what? I'm not sure what's happening right now. But anyway, Jack is called in this movie, I think, in a really deep way, to become more than a kid with allergies, right? Like, Mrs. Claus says to him, like, "Go be my hero." Right. Which is like, again, I'm getting emotional, man. Like it was just one of the most moving moments in the whole thing, because he's like, that's what my mom used to say to me. Like just speaking to his person, right? Like here's someone who's lost his mother, and like Mrs. Claus in that way has kind of stepped into being his mom, you know, like, oh, what a beautiful, it was just a beautiful, beautiful moment. And it reminded me of this, so I've been working through it. I'm almost finished with Andy Root's latest book called The End of Youth Ministry ? Which is very good. And I recommend it to anyone.
I've got it right over there somewhere.
Yeah, it's good. But he tells the story of like it's all kind of framed around this young woman who ends up in the youth group. She ends up in the hospital, and her mom has to go. And then this youth pastor who's like been basically charged with being like the fun, youth pastor or whatever it is, and she's not interested in doing that, and is in danger of losing her job unless a certain amount of kids come. She decides to cancel this big event and instead to go, because she feels like Jesus is calling her to go be in the hospital with the mom and this daughter. And so she does that. And what ends up happening is that like all of the youth group starts coming to visit as well. So all of them start going to the hospital, sitting and just kind of keeping vigil, praying with the mom, all of this kind of stuff. And what ends up happening is they're all sitting around sharing stories. And the janitor from the church shows up and tells a story about why he's, someone's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, well, I'm here because, years ago, my baby girl got sick and died. And I wasn't there because I was too busy getting high. And sorry. Just like the pain of that is so abundantly clear, like how that would be so painful, right? And then as he's sitting, in like a halfway house or whatever, like just totally like doing more drugs, like mired in shame because of this thing. He like feels this like hand on his shoulder. And the voice says to him, like, your little girl is with me. Go and basically like, come to me and be free. Right. And so he goes, stumbles into a church, joins a Bible study, and totally changes his life. And like another mom from the church is there when he's telling this story. And she says like, I had something very similar happen to me, and so they are all sharing these stories of like, it's just incredible. And what she says is that she was once in a hospital because she had miscarried her baby. And she had like infertility problems. And so it was this big thing of getting pregnant and like a beautiful thing. And so she loses the baby and is just devastated. And what she's like meets some old lady in the hospital. And like, she says something to her. I think it's just like, I will turn your sorrow into joy, and all like says something from the scriptures. And she just starts sobbing because it was the thing that her grandmother always used to say to her. And oh man. And it's just like the power of that is so incredible, that like the Lord knows like what our hearts need to hear. Sorry, I don't know. I'm getting so emotional, but
yeah, that's okay.
It's just really powerful to me. That there's something so freeing and kind about our Lord that he does that. And like Saint Nick, Santa Claus nails it. Like that's exactly what's going on, I think, in these moments, right? A Pierce always sees it through kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry. Anyway.
Well, I think, and that is, I think the magnitude of, I think, of the fact that like, he's willing to bend all of this, like for the sake of the one, right? I mean, like, when you think about this guy who's sort of mired in addiction, right? And that like in the midst of, being wherever he was, that the Lord and master of the universe, right, is able to sort of like come down from the heavens essentially in that moment to say something to him in particular, right? The magnitude of this, like, I don't know. I mean, like as we're sharing this, right? I think of like one of the most formative experiences of my life, which was kind of something similar to that. My dad passed away in college, and I wasn't a believer or anything at the time, and I had this like existential crisis because I thought like if there really is no God and my dad is gone, then like my dad is gone, right? Like he's just, his body is decomposing somewhere and that's it. And just like for weeks calling out, into the nothingness, just being like, I don't know if you're there, but if you're there, please take care of my dad. And then like weeks into this, having this experience of like a hand, right? Just like this guy having like a hand sort of come around me, right? And this voice just tell me he's okay, and because the magnitude of this, right, is like you're calling out into the nothingness, right? And somebody hears you in the midst of the nothingness, right? And somebody like just bothers to respond. Like that's, I don't know, like that's very, like I'm getting getting goosebumps even just like thinking about this now.
Yeah.
Like as like Santa is willing to put Christmas at risk for the sake of like spending these hours with Teddy and Kate because they matter that much, right? And it's not that they matter more or less than anything else, right? Like that's it's not like a zero-sum game. Like we all matter that much, and God is willing to do that for each and every one of us. And that's, and that's what it is to like, that's what ministry is, right? That's what it is to like pastor to somebody. It's to meet people in those moments and be like, you, nothing else matters more than you right now. Yeah. And I see you and I hear you and I'm like with you and I'm calling you into something. I'm calling you into safety and I'm calling you into something like that's not this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that those stories are essential ones to share because like even you telling that story, which I've heard from you, like, I mean, we've been friends for years now. And like, we've talked that story over and over. I don't mean that in the way of like, I've heard it over and over again, but like every time you tell it, right. It's like, it bears so much cause for reflection and so much cause for inspiration and like hope and beauty, right. That like, as you share that story, it feels to me as if I am there with you experiencing that too. Like, so your experience of like the Lord's hand on your shoulder becomes my experience of the Lord's hand on your shoulder. Yeah. Right. Like there's an event that's recounted, and which is, I think why St. Paul is always like retelling about like his stories, of like, I was this and that. And then like, I got the crap kicked out of me and like, everyone's like, oh my gosh. And like, everyone wants to listen to this dude talk for forever because, to the point where he bores a kid to death, but like
literally
bores a kid to death.
Which I will say, one thing that we can pat ourselves on the back, I don't think we've done that over the course of the last few years. Never bored a kid to death.
Yeah. So in that regard, we are just way ahead, leaps and bounds ahead of St. Paul. So
nailed it.
He really could have learned a thing or two from us, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, but all of this, right? I think that what there ends up being through kind of like that call is for Belsnickel, right? For Jack, for Teddy, there's this reaching through that is just done in this act of mercy, right? It's like it is a mercy that this happens, and it's so powerful. He doesn't like beat them over the head with this and be like, you got to get your act together and you got to but like Santa, he gives Belsnickel that thing that they worked on together, and he calls him back to like, I mean, basically I feel like that thing is kind of like sacramental, right? Yeah. It becomes like the embodiment of their relationship in some way, that he's like, I've never given up on this.
Yeah. He improved it even, right?
Yeah.
Because isn't there something sacramental in that? It's like, here's this wine and bread that you gave me. How about this?
Yeah. Exactly. And it just melts his heart, right? It melts Belsnickel's heart. And I think that like you have to see that like the love and the mercy go hand in hand for this. And I've often thought about, that Mumford & Sons song where like the lyric is, it's not the long walk home that'll change a heart, but the welcome that I receive with every start. And like, that is it. That's it. Like, all right, here we go again.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you're going to keep screwing up. Here we go again. We're going to keep doing this. Yeah. Start over.
Yeah. That's the that's the amazing thing about this portrayal of Santa Claus, right? Because like Santa does give coal, right? This portrayal of Santa Claus does give coal.
He does.
You know, the only people who get coal though in this are like those gangsters that like take Teddy in the first movie and are apparently going to kill him and like compost him in the back, right? They're the only ones who get coal. But every other like bad kid, right? Every other bad kid, like Santa doesn't give coal. Santa like gives gifts to. Santa gives himself to. Santa spends, right? Like again, the whole thing like the first movie is about saving Teddy, and the second one it's about saving Belschnickel and Kate, right? Like none of them get punished, right? Like Santa sees them in the midst of their trauma, their difficulty, right? Whatever it is to let them like not live up to their full potential. And he spends time with them and he ministers to them. And there's something so sweet because when he says goodbye, right? He always says like, be good. It's always the last thing that he says, right? Like he sees them, he loves them, he raises them up to something else. And like, that's when at the very end, be good, keep this going. And he walks away, and that's kind of like his last word for them.
I mean, and you even talked about this kind of offline, but like that's so the story of the woman caught in adultery, right? Like, there's this kind of willingness to put himself on the line. I mean, Jesus is standing, like people are like, the law of Moses says that we should stone someone, and so Jesus is prepared to go up against the law of Moses, right? Like he's going toe to toe with Moses on this one. Is kind of like what people are trying to do with him.
Yeah.
Right. And then Jesus, of course, does his cool, like Jesus jujitsu stuff. And which I always love. I always love when Jesus like kind of jujitsus the conversation in a way that people go like, ah, crap. Like,
you're not actually going to transgress the law. Dang it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, who gave you your authority? Is it from, you know, like how can you do this? And he's like, good question. Let me ask you a question first. Right? Yes. Like it's very like,
where did John the Baptist come from? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We can't answer that.
Yeah. I don't know that. What is your favorite color? I love that it always comes back to Monty Python for us. Mm-hmm. But all of it, right, is based in this relationality again of Jesus, of Santa Claus. Like the be good is kind of like the final thing that he says, right? And Jesus with the woman caught in adultery is like, go and leave your life of sin, not because you're naughty, but because like look at what almost happened, right? Yeah. Like I just like that was something that went down, right? Like like maybe, you know, look at your life, look at your choices. Like
maybe stop
doing that. Because like, I mean, it's just obviously leading toward not good situations for you. But Jesus, you know, he's the only one in that passage too who talks to her. Yeah. Everyone else is talking about her, right? And he doesn't call her by name, but he does call her woman, which, you know, is not like a woman go make me a sandwich kind of woman, or like, you know, that kind of demeaning thing, but rather is actually an honorific title.
Yeah.
It's the same thing he calls his own mother.
Yeah.
You know, like he says, woman, what does that have to do with me? Woman, where are those who accuse you? Right. And really it's this kind of like madam or my lady. It's this like dignifying name that he gives her, which is really, really, really beautiful, that he first gives her dignity and then tells her to be good.
Yeah.
You know? But not like be good so that you can have dignity. It's like, no, you already have it because you were made in my image. You're made in my likeness. And,
which is how that conversation needs to happen, right? Because like she's not going to accept that call outside of that safety, right? Like this is kind of the rhythm of ministry and the way that sometimes we do things backwards. You know, we sometimes kind of like lead with the legalism. We lead with the, you shouldn't be doing that. No. But it kind of comes out of nowhere. It's not born of any sort of like love or relationship. Like, you know, this kind of goes back to that, like seeing people who they are and calling them by name. Like all of these people that Santa Claus touches in this movie want to rise to the level, right? They want to be the person that Santa knows they can be. They're not, I mean, because like on some level, they're not afraid of the consequences, right? It's like that might jar them back to reality. But like when Teddy wants to be new, when Kate wants to be new, when Belschnickel wants to be new, like they're leaning into and they're living into who they are in Santa's eyes, right? Is who they want to be in real life. Like that's kind of actually the dialogue in the second movie when Belsnickel is like, I'm never going to be able to be that elf again, right? Like he's caught in this like web of self-loathing and so forth. But Mr. and Mrs. Claus are able to continue to affirm to him like, no, we actually see who you are. And we know that that's who you're capable of being. We love you. And then that's when Belsnickel opens up and tells them that he loves them as well. And that's when like the curse is broken, right? Like all of these people are trying to like be the person that Santa sees them. And like this woman caught in adultery, like if she does go and sin no more, you know, the consequences of almost getting stoned are certainly the thing that smack her to reality. But it's like, she's living into that relationship that the Lord has created for her, right? Like she's sinning no more because she wants to be the person that Jesus sees. She wants to be that lady, right? That he's calling her into being. She doesn't want to be the woman in the dirt, chased after by a gang of men who are going to like stone her to death, right? And that again, like that's another way of like that's what ministry is. When Jesus calls to the broken guy in the midst of his like drug addiction, right? Like he transforms his life because he wants to be the person that Jesus sees him as.
Yeah. You
know, like, and when we reach out to people and we have these like moments of tenderness with people, you know, like when you do this yes trip, right? And you're spending time with people in Skid Row, like you're actually like, that's a taste of the kingdom. Like you're showing them who people are, not in the eyes of the world, not in the socioeconomic stratified, whatever, but like who you are, like you matter, you know, you matter because you matter to Jesus and you matter to me. And that's the sort of thing that lifts us out of whatever it might be, right? Because we've all got something.
What a beautiful world, right? What a beautiful world that makes this. Like to be able to like go to all corners of the world and to be able to say, I see you, right? Like I actually see you. You're not invisible to me. Like you were saying, right? That like for someone to see you or hear you as you cry out in the middle of the nothingness, right? Like we can be that and do that. So like we can go into the nothingness, but we have to be able to bear it. You know what I mean? Like that's part of the thing is like, I think a lot of it is that we can't bear it. Yeah. Because we don't practice nothingness. Yeah. Right. And I think that part is part of the fasting and the almsgiving and the prayer of like prayers tells me I am nothing. Right. So that like, because my life comes from God. Fasting tells me I am empty. Like I am empty. I'm completely dependent on everything else around me, the world, the food, the whatever. And like the other kind of way of being nothingness is to like actually give things to other people, right? To experience like in a really felt sense in my bones what nothingness feels like. Yeah. Right. For the sake of someone else. I will give you this thing and I will not have it. Yeah. Yeah. It costs me something. Yeah. You know, and all of this is a way of practicing nothingness, embracing our own nothingness, living into it, feeling the nothingness of our stomachs, you know, in our stomachs. Like, oh, geez, that is a lived experience of being nothing. Because being only hungry. Christ fills. Yes. Right. And that's where, to go back to that three-legged stool, right? Like if it's only about prayer and fasting, like it is so easy for that not to be about the nothingness and to be drawn into relationship, right? It's about like, look at me because I ate the shrimp today instead of the meat. Look at me today. 500 Jesus prayers. Look at me. I did like, look at all these prostrations and like, I actually got, you know, rug burns on my knees from all of it. Who been there, done that. I mean, like, I get that. And like, and all of that is a house of cards upon which like, it's nothing at the end of the day. Because no matter how many Jesus prayers you do, no matter how like good your fasting is, if it's still about you at the end of the day, it's all an illusion. You know, you done messed up, Ron. You done messed up. Insubordinate and churlish is all you are. I saw this great meme about Baby Yoda and his true name, which we can't talk about right now because it'll make me cry. Soon. It makes me cry. I've gotten really sad about it. I have this ongoing like back and forth with one of my friends about his name. Yeah. And it's very fun. It's been very, very fun to go back and forth because he keeps telling me that I don't want what's good for Baby Yoda because I won't accept his real name. You will not call him by name. You call him Baby Yoda. Yeah. Well, I'm not going to call him that. Yeah. But anyway, these movies are good. They're fun.
Yeah.
Okay, let me back up. They're not good movies. Like, let's be clear about that. Like, they're very much like Hallmarky, Christmassy, whatever stuff, cheesy fondue-ness.
And that's okay.
But look, they're beautiful. There's beauty. So much beauty.
There is.
I'm glad we watched them with your kids or any other kids, just random kids. Go find some random kids. Put them in your car.
I'm going to have to pump the brakes on this now.
Take them to your house.
I'm going to have to pump the brakes on this. We are not actually endorsing this.
Yeah.
I will say
Coffee Hour does not officially endorse kidnapping.
Yeah. Unofficially. Wink. I'm kidding. We're kidding. I watch these videos in the solitude of my own home by myself, and I will say they're just as wholesome watching by yourself. If that's your living condition, that's okay. That's okay.
Steve did not feel the need to take random children into his home to watch this movie.
I didn't. I watched them by myself, and they were fun, but I got to talk about them with my friend. So that was a nice thing that was done.
Let's be clear that if you take random children into your home to watch this movie, random police officers will come into your home and take you out of it. So
there are consequences.
Yeah. Yes.
This is a silly little diversion at the very end, but it was funny.
Yes. Don't kidnap kids. Nobody kidnap anybody.
Yes, this is a joke. This is a bit. Yes. We do a lot of bits on this.
There's
on this
a lot
thing.
of
this
bits.
is a bit.
There's a lot of bits.
But at the end of the day, this was like, they were fun movies, and whether you watch it alone or whether you watch it with your family or whether you talk about it with a friend, I think it's a nice thing to put you into the Christmas spirit, though, at the very least.
Truly.
You know, and actually Monday's episode of Be the Bee is going to be a little bit more about the Christmas spirit. So as we prepare for Christmas, whether you're watching it now a week and a half before, or whether you're listening to this just a few days before, do have a very Merry Christmas. Although, like I said, we'll be back next week with another special episode.
Steve, why don't you close us out with talking about our philanthropic stuff of the week?
Yeah. Pop culture philanthropic corner. So one thing we've been doing over the course of the last few episodes, is just kind of highlighting a cool thing that's happening out there. Sometimes by Orthodox Christians, not necessarily, but just this kind of like this the third leg of the stool that we were talking about, almsgiving. It's worth kind of highlighting. And we've actually kind of touched on this organization before. Christian brought them up because our friends in the YES program are actually kind of part of Focus North America. And Focus North America is the group that we want to highlight today. You will find the link to their website down in the video description. Focus is really cool. It is a national movement of Orthodox Christians united in faith and desire to provide action-oriented and sustainable solutions to poverty in communities across America. So, you know IOCC, which does international stuff. Focus is much more of like a domestic organization. It's got operations and youth volunteer experiences in more than 20 cities in the United States. It's got a whole mess of focus centers from Cleveland to Detroit to Pittsburgh. But even if you're not in a city where there's a focus center near you, like there's a young adult group here in New York, which actually just in a couple of days are going to be putting hygiene kits together in partnership with Focus. So there's opportunities for your parish, your community to do something to be able to kind of like live out this philanthropic almsgiving call as well. Focus really is a wonderful leader leading this movement, doing great work. If you want to hear more about them, you can go to their website. Like I said, link it down below, or just go to focusna.org. They are worth supporting on a monthly basis. They're worth sort of like working with, if you can bring them out to your community. They just do great work. And in the spirit of highlighting some of this great work, we want to highlight Focus this week.
Amen. Well, I guess that's it.
That's it. We will be back next week for a special bonus episode. Looking forward to that.
Oh, snap.
Yes.
All
just try to hear the recorder. The recorder in your mind.
Huh?
The music, the recorder, the recorder. Isn't it a recorder? Like the theme song of this thing that we will be doing? It's a recorder.
I mean, it's not like a recorder.
It sounds like a recorder.
No, it does not.
It kind of sounds like a recorder.
It does not sound like a recorder.
We'll talk about this next time.
Do you know what a recorder is?
I played one in second grade. Thank you very much.
It is definitely not that thing that you played in second grade.